What's up, Penn State fans? It is BWI Live Show for Wednesday, May 21st. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. It is a gloomy day in central Pennsylvania, but we have plenty of news to keep your sun-shining spirits as Penn State rolls through the month of May. Frank, it is kind of an interesting month. I wrote this in a story that's going to publish at Blue White Illustrated later this week, but May is an interesting month because everything is sort of on the cusp of happening, but everything is not really happening. What I mean by that is summer workouts not underway just yet, but we know they're coming. The summer semester week just started. We're going to get into what that means for Penn State with some roster news here in a bit. But official visit season is here, but camp season not quite here yet. TV kick times starting to leak out, but they're not all here yet, coming later this month. So it is a month of sort of hurrying up to wait. And then you get a blast of info, as you guys got at the Elite 11, and then the official visit calendar, obviously rolling last weekend, and now we wait for the next one. So how are we doing this morning?
Good. It's a good time to take some vacation for people, which I have not done. So here we are on the 21st, and that window is closing. But it's always that's the thing, is there's always something to talk about, and these are good times for us to get into the kind of deeper thoughts and maybe some more things that when there's news, we don't have a time to really sit back and think through some stuff. So I like this time of year for kind of the sit back and chew on some things, have conversations with you and Nate and Ryan and Fitz about different aspects of Penn State football and what we're thinking about for the fall. So that's kind of what we got today with our defensive power rankings. This one much more interesting than the offense, in that, like, I made a 5 through 1. I don't know that it's accurate whatsoever, because it's not just about the talent. The talent is obviously the most important thing, but how do you use the talent, and how are you planning to put that, who's the star of the show? Because everyone's doing 1/11th on defense, but not every single player is doing the task that's going to get the stat, the tackle for loss. That's all that stuff. So that's kind of where I am in that context.
All right. Well, we'll get into that in the second half of the show. First, though, we got some roster news to get you updated on. Penn State on Tuesday morning announcing the addition of Amari Campbell, North Carolina linebacker, coming to Penn State. He committed earlier this month. And Trevor Pena, the receiver from Syracuse, who committed to the Lions on the Blue-White game day back in late April, both now on campus. Everyone knew that was coming, and if you're a member over at Blue White Illustrated, you knew the third thing that was coming, which was that Daniel Jennings, very top-rated recruit in the class of 2026 from West Virginia, is going the Max Granville route, reclassifying to 2025, and will be on campus here in a couple of months whenever he wraps up his high school stuff. So, Frank, I don't really remember a situation like this for Penn State, and I got to think it's pretty rare across the country where you get back-to-back defensive lineman reclassifications to get guys on campus sooner. It's rare. I'm not sure it was necessarily planned that way when Daniel Jennings committed, but at the same time, can you blame him based on how year one went for Max Granville?
Yeah, and but that's exactly the situation, right? So when you see somebody do something, that's how you get the idea, and then that idea spreads. So that if it's going to happen once, another player is going to do it, especially if it's successful. And so I don't know that this is going to start a trend. Right. At the same time, this is not new to college football and to high school recruiting, where you've had quarterbacks. Usually it's other positions that reclassify early, sometimes receivers, rarely defensive linemen, just because of, what it takes to be a defensive lineman in college. But early enrollees were not a trend at one point, and there was only a couple of people doing it. Now half the class is doing that.
And more would if they could, for sure.
Right, exactly. So I'm curious to see if this continues. I don't think it's right for everybody. I don't think everybody should do it. But if it's right for you and it makes sense, then, it's something that we're going to see going forward for sure, especially if there's this continued push for immediacy, right? Not waiting, and that – I guess I struggle with, like, there's the obvious development in football that has to happen from a purely, you can't rush time, because if you're 17, your body is less developed than if you're 18. That's just the human growth cycle. You can't really adjust that. But at the same time, if you get to college and you get into a professional weightlifting program, that does accelerate the timeline. So I'm always concerned Greg, I always feel like the wet blanket of like, I want to be a part of the fun, but I also want to say like, all right, hold on.
Right.
Let's just let's not assume Daniel Jennings is going to contribute this year.
Right.
That's what we said with Max Granville, right?
Right.
It's similar situation.
Yeah, no, you have to take it as not where Max Granville finished, but where he started, which was, it's great to get this guy on campus. You'll see what he does. He got very good early returns in preseason camp, ended up preserving his red shirt, playing in 4 regular season games and then 3 in the postseason. But Daniel Jennings does not have to go that route. Penn State would love it. I'm sure he would love it if that was the case, but it doesn't have to go that way. So we'll see how he ends up working out here once he gets on campus.
Yeah.
But this one, at least, I think, yeah, go ahead.
So 6'2", 250. Super interesting that he's that big, 250 already. I know he's not currently on campus with the other 10 players that we're going to be talking about here in just a second. But if you're already 250, you're enrolling early. Not everybody is going to do it, but is the door open for Jennings to move inside? Maybe. I was watching him this morning to refresh my understanding of what Daniel Jennings was as a recruit, because it's been a while, right? He committed really early in the process. He's a dude that's a really good run defender, very physical, very strong. I don't think he's Max Granville from a talent perspective in terms of explosive outside speed rusher. And when you're 250 and you're not even a senior yet, you at least have to ask the question. Would be another one of those stocky defensive tackles for Penn State. I have no idea. I don't think his body type screams defensive tackle like a Xavier Gilliam, but who knows? That's just, I think the door might be open to that based on his skill set as well.
Penn State will take getting him on campus sooner rather than later. Either way, you're right. You can't rush time. You cannot rush development, but you can certainly augment the process by getting into all of the opportunities Penn State has, both in the weight room and nutrition, things like that. So,
Greg, what do you think about this? And I know I'm probably putting you in an awkward situation, but I'm always interested in the human side of this too, where when you're enrolling early, you are foregoing part of your childhood. I'm just going to say in the emotional words, right? You're giving up the second half of your senior year. You enroll early, you're giving up your whole senior year. That's just 1 year of now you're in a professional environment, essentially. You are now in the big leagues. And people do this all the time from an academic standpoint, so I don't want to make this something that it's not. But at the same time, I don't know, what do you think of that particular side of these things?
I think it's just the way, and you mentioned it a couple minutes ago, but I think it's just the way that college sports has been trending. It started with the early enrollees. You're right. I went back. I haven't compiled it all yet, but I did go back and look to see where Penn State was at the early enrollment perspective. You can't go all the way back to the start of the James Franklin era, because things were obviously very different then. But if you go back to 2017, 2018, I think that's a little bit more of a reasonable period of time to look at. And the numbers just keep growing up. Going up. This trend just continues. And I think that the more you see guys enroll early in January and give up that second half, and the more guys see others have success and decide to come, in this period where you're giving up your full senior year, it'll just, continue to trend that way. I don't think this is going to become something that is similar to the early enrollment, though, where guys were, Penn State, let's just use the number 25, for example. You signed a 25-man class. Maybe at one point in time you had 6 early enrollees, and now you have 12. Right. I don't think you're going to start going from 1 or 2 guys coming to the program early to 5, 6, 7. So it's interesting, but again, I think that the other thing you got to remember too is, like Max Granville, Daniel Jennings has been committed for a very long time. So those kind of guys are the ones that I think are more likely to be able to do this and have an interest in doing it, because they've already in some ways been a part of the program for a year, if not more. So pretty interesting to see how it all works out, but certainly something to see if other players consider in the future. Yeah.
Isn't it, just rewind to 2000.
I just want to get to this, Rob. Sure. I'm not sure what you mean by some degree. It's the whole degree. If Penn State and the school and the football program didn't want him to do it, he wouldn't have the option to do it. So I'm not totally. I'm not really sure what exactly you're getting at, but if you can give us some more context, I'm happy to discuss it. But there's not some degree. It's all the degree. The kid comes to Penn State, and then Penn State has to decide not just the football program, but the university side of it. Can this work? Yeah.
It's wild to think, go back to 2008, just as a random point in time before the 2010s, before all this started to accelerate. We were talking about, are you a junior and are you seeing the field for the first time, right? Like you would talk about a guy gets on campus as a freshman and redshirting is the norm. Now we're talking about guys reclassifying. It's so that not only are they freshmen, they're maybe a 17-year-old freshman or, turning 18 during the fall. And then we're having a discussion of, are they ready by the next year? Are they ready by their redshirt freshman season? We're talking about some of these freshmen that arrived in January being a part of the 2 deep in the fall. Like, it's just this accelerated timeline for everything. And part of that is we've learned, like, it is part of it of like, there's less efficiency if guys aren't learning how to lift for the first time on the whole. And then we've learned like how to accelerate all the different processes to make this happen. So it is more reasonable, but it is just funny to think about how, when you and I started here or when we were growing up watching football, it's like, well, you're not going to put anybody out there until a junior, and then we'll have the conversation.
Yeah, certainly the game and the sport of college football obviously has changed in so many ways over the year. This is just another one of those. So, like we said, Daniel Jennings coming to Penn State early, but there's some guys that just got to campus who were planning to come to campus at this point of the calendar year. So Penn State had early enrollees, obviously, in its class of 2025. Not everyone was able to do that, but most guys are either done with high school or have been done for a little bit and are now showing up on campus, and those guys are on the roster now for the Penn State football program. So let's run through that list quick, T. Frank. I guess let's start with Malachi Goodman, 6'6", 310 pounds is what Penn State lists. One of the top recruits in its class of 2025 who is now on campus. Chaz Coleman, as you can see there, I think someone just mentioned in the chat, he is here now. 6'4", 220-pound defensive lineman rather. Jameer Joseph is here. Matt Henderson, Jeff Exner, Cam Smith, Cortez Harris, Xavier Thomas, Brady O'Hara, who of course Penn State now lists as an offensive lineman after listing him as an athlete, I believe, when it signed him. We all knew that was coming. Josh Johnson, and of course you have Daniel Jennings coming as well. So T. Frank, any just initial thoughts on the group? Jabri Walls-Coleman is the last one to come to campus. He'll come later this year when Jennings does. Running back out of Imhotep is going to be the last one to show up from the class.
Yeah, I guess the only thing is I don't love the new trend of not having new information. So, the heights and weights here are from signing day, which was, I don't know if you've noticed, 6 months ago. So, guys like Chaz Coleman is 245. If he's 220 arriving now, there's no conversation about does he have any ability to play this fall. At 245, the conversation is, okay, how quickly can you pick up playing defensive end? How quickly can Dion Barnes download the knowledge from his brain into Coleman's brain and then have him go do that? There's an opportunity. Yep. You got Coleman, Daniel Jennings. There's a lot of edge players in this next crop, but how many of them are going to be ready and how many can contribute this year? It's an interesting dynamic when you've got two guys at the top and then a lot of questions, meaning a lot of opportunity behind that. I am not the only one, but I think everyone's a huge fan of Chaz Coleman, the athleticism. He's the kind of guy, if he's the right size, there's an opportunity that he doesn't know how to play football, but he's still effective, like as a third down pass rusher, because he's that athletic. Just the ability, the size, the natural movement skills, the bend. Try not to get too crazy about that. And then, of course, Malachi Goodman, as you mentioned, what's the initial response about Malachi Goodman? I think it's the thing I'm most interested in because we haven't seen these guys that are 6'6", 310, and also borderline 5-star offensive linemen. Usually we're talking about guys that have to reshape their body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if they're that big. So what's the initial impression that we get from, our reporting at Blue White Illustrated about Malachi Goodman? I guess those are the two main things I take from that. You mentioned Brady O'Hara. That's just a fascinating recruitment because, any other year, any other timeline in Penn State's history, a tight end that's transitioning to offensive line. I'm always a fan of trying to find those athletes that are going to be exceptional for the position they're moving to. Brady O'Hara would be. He's one of the guys in the room now. Any other year, I'd be like, okay, that's a great prospect. Let's see where that develops. They've got 3 of them. And I'm not saying that Brady O'Hara is doomed or anything. It's just a comment about where that room is and how much they've done to add talent. When you got a guy like Malachi Goodman and then Owen Alcini, who arrived in January.
Right, and turned heads during spring practice as well. So, yeah, we'll get our first look at those guys probably sometime in June, get an early progress report on where things are going, and then we'll learn more, of course, throughout July as preseason camp approaches. But that group is here. I can't believe no one in the chat has brought up Jeff Exner, receiver. Hello.
Yeah.
Is everyone still sleeping on this rainy day? New receivers here, everyone. It's not
Put it
just
up.
Pena. Yep.
Yeah.
Curious to see what he can, do this summer to try and put himself in position to play in a room that, as we've said and written over and over, both here and at BlueIllustrate.com, is clearly wide open. So another guy in that room for Marcus Hagans to work with, and obviously for Drew Aller and the offense to build a rapport with this summer. But the group is here, and Penn State, I'm sure, has been eagerly awaiting those guys' arrival, and they've certainly been waiting to get here and catch up with their classmates who were here for the spring. So time will tell what they can do, but certainly I think a good stepping stone for Penn State as the offseason rolls along.
And he's the kind of guy that at 6'1", anywhere 220 or south, I'd imagine. I don't think whatever his updated weight is going to be more than 220, because that's wow. We're getting towards like, should he play linebacker sort of size at 6'1", 220. But he's obviously an outside receiver fit, and that's what Penn State needs on this roster. They don't have a lot of those guys that are ready and obvious to step in to the two deep behind. I'd say really at that X position, just in a general sense of where we're starting on the roster behind Kyron Hudson. Jeff Exner is a guy that I had mixed feelings with in general as a recruit. I don't know where he is on his timeline and development. So, he's not a guy that I'm immediately assuming is a part of this conversation. But again, he's a McDonough guy. I wouldn't rule it out that he's done some major development since we saw him last in November or whenever that was.
So Penn State, when they bring these guys in, they do not list specific positions for all of them. That's especially true in the secondary, T. Frank. Josh Johnson's a guy who Penn State brings in with a decision to make where he is going to play. Where is he going to start his career? Any thoughts whether that's cornerback or safety?
Yeah, I think long-term he's going to be a great nickel safety or field safety. I think one of those two, just generally playing a position where he's playing more zone and playing in deep coverage, but also he's got the athleticism to play man. So if you've got a 6'2", 195-pound, 200-pound outside corner that has elite feet and plays that position, I'm not moving him. Like, I'm not saying that's something they have to do. But if the discussion is maybe we got better corners that play on the outside, like Jameer Joseph, who is a pure outside corner, moving Josh Johnson to the nickel, that's the guy in this defense that I think makes it sing. And so he could play any of the four positions from a physical perspective. So what's the best fit and where is his talent maximized? So I'm leaning more towards the inside because that dude hits.
Yes. So we'll see what Penn State decides with him. Obviously, they got some other decisions to potentially make as well in terms of where guys start. But more of that will be discussed throughout June, T. Frank, as we roll into the next portion of the offseason here on the BWI live show. Just making sure everything's good. I love that when you get a phone call and then your AirPods get a little confused and then I can't hear you, and I just had to check and make sure all the settings were still good.
Okay. Are we on the same page again? Because I was hearing myself in your headphones like a full 30 seconds late.
Yes, no, we are good to go now. Everything is fixed up and ready to roll. Next part of the BWI live show, that's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. If not T. Frank, just shoot me a text and we'll get it squared away. But the first betting line of the year is out for Penn State. The DraftKings Sportsbook posted week 1 lines on Monday of this week. Penn State is opening the season with Nevada. Nittany Lions are welcoming them to town for the first time. And they are a 43.5-point favorite in a game where I would expect that line to go up moving forward, T. Frank. It is going to be almost certainly the first of 3 times in September during the non-conference portion of the schedule that Penn State is a 40-plus point favorite. To put that in perspective, they've been a 40-plus point favorite 3 times in the last 2 years. They're going to do it 3 times in 1 month. Definitely Villanova will be probably 60 if they even line it, which they probably won't. But 43.5, I think that number's on the move. Penn State, if we know anything about teams are supposed to beat, they typically do it and cover
Yeah.
by a lot. Those last two 40-point instances, they were pitched 2 shutouts and gave up 7 points in the other one, while approaching, I think it was 56 points in the one game and then cleared 60 in the other two. So we knew that game was going to be a blowout, T. Frank, and this is just the first number that offers the latest indication of that.
Does this provide you any context or insight into kind of like Penn State's talent level? Because the last time I remember them actually blowing teams out in this manner where you're like, oh, wow. Obviously, Pitt is not Nevada, but 2017, like in those 2017, 2016 teams where obviously they were a college football playoff team and had the talent. They didn't make it, but that was, some of the best teams that Penn State's had since then.
Yeah.
Do you get any sense of that from this, or is it just truly the non-conference schedule is so bad that no one is really going to give anybody a chance to make these games interesting?
Yeah, I just think that from a betting perspective, I think it's well known now in betting circles that James Franklin tends to blow out teams he's supposed to, and he's going to cover if it's in doubt. I can't remember who they were playing when they scored that touchdown at the buzzer to win, but that covered that spread. I'm trying to remember who that was. Anyway, the game. Oh, it was Maryland. And then it was the testy exchange with Mike Loxley afterwards. Yeah. Yes. But yeah, so I think that's well known in betting circles. But no, I mean, all this tells me is that it's the latest reminder that Penn State is going to have one of, if not the worst, non-conference schedule in the country. And I know Georgia's isn't very good either. And there's a lot of other contenders who are going to be projected to be either college football playoff champions or make a deep run in it that don't have a good non-conference schedule. So not beating up Penn State as the sole college football team among the favorites to win this year's title, but it is ugly. It's going to start with Nevada. Yeah. It's not going to get much better with FIU, and then Villanova will be, Villanova. So, you can say all you want that, any given Saturday and all that. if Penn State gets got by one of these 3 teams, then something's a lot worse off than we could have ever imagined.
Yeah, and I'm not to promote the conversation from within and kind of parrot some of James Franklin's talking points, but yeah, when you've got a 9-game conference schedule, I mean, do you want to add eventually? Yes. No. Eventually we're going to get to an NFL model where they're only playing good teams. And like, maybe they'll have some sort of scrimmage with Villanova in a preseason format. But until then, and until the SEC's also playing 9 conference games, like I don't have any problem other than making sure that you all are still interested by September 18th or whatever random day in the middle of September. Like,
don't forget bye. Yeah, they also play bye in September. Don't forget
please.
About that.
Make sure you stick around. We've got like post-game shows and we got pre-game shows and tailgate shows and all these live shows and James Franklin press conferences in September. Just make sure like you keep up to date and stay along with everything. Cause that's my biggest concern for November is like, don't be Green Day. Don't have me wake you up when September ends.
Well, I think everyone will wake up before that because of the Oregon game at the end of the month. But you're right.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting first couple weeks. I do feel bad for the fans who have tickets to these games because I'm sure by the time the last one rolls around, everyone will be a little bit over that portion of the schedule. But at the same time, you make a very fair point. It's a valid one, and it's part of the Penn State scheduling philosophy that if you're going to play one more conference game than your main conference rival, so to speak, then why should you load your schedule with non-conference games that are basically like conference games? So I don't begrudge or it's just the way of the world in college football. This is what it sometimes takes. Yeah. And until they get things figured out on a number of different levels, just kind of the way it's going to be. So we'll have to wait and see how all that plays out. But 43.5 points, D. Frank, I would lay them. I think this line should approach 50 by the time all is said and done.
I'll trust you. I've never placed a bet in my life, so I'm going to go with your expertise on this for sure.
All right. Well, we'll see how that all shakes out, and there's more lines coming, I'm sure, as the offseason progresses. But last one on the news and notes side of things. Yep, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's just totally unimportant. That's not true. We had a promotion with a casino one time when I was back on the radio, so I have technically placed a bet. I did have an account with, like, Rivers or something like that. Yeah. So I factually that was incorrect, but in spirit I didn't do it independently. I still don't know how to do that.
I would suggest keeping it that way from experience. So don't
Got it.
don't go down the rabbit hole.
Got it.
Highly strongly suggested. But last bit of news and notes: Penn State updated its construction project. It did update its Beaver Stadium stuff. You guys talked about that yesterday. But the new bubble that's being built, practice bubble being built for the Olympic sports in State College, the turf is now down for that structure. You can see it if you're watching here on the YouTube channel, either live or on replay, of course. So Penn State making progress there. It's that time of year, obviously with most sports winding down. Baseball still going in the Big Ten tournament. I think track and field has some action left. Obviously, the men's lacrosse team plays in the NCAA Final Four this weekend, but the turf is down in this bubble. They're making good progress, and more will be expected to be made throughout the rest of the summer before students and staff and everybody else returns to campus for the fall. So, that's the latest facility update, T. Frank.
Yeah, and I just the reason I wanted to bring this up, and I saw this when I was trolling social media this morning, just kind of perusing what everyone's talking about. I don't think fans realize. I'll give you an example. We were in Haluba Hall for one of Penn State's spring practices. It's getting towards 8:00, and I'm sitting on the turf on the sideline working on the videos, trying to get them up to you on the YouTube channel as quickly as possible. And in strolls Erica Dombach, the Penn State women's soccer coach. And she says, "Hey, are you guys wrapped up? We've got practice here." First off, it's 8:00 at night. Second off, they're using Haluba Hall just like the lacrosse team, just like the field hockey team, I think, at some point. So, like, Haluba Hall, we think of Lash building, Haluba Hall, all as Penn State's, football's building. That's not the case. Like, everybody uses it. When we're waiting to go inside, there is a TV with the schedule of, like, the building is checked out for the, whatever from 8:30 until 9:45 a.m. or something like that. So as much as it matters or doesn't matter, getting this up so that first off, those sports have a place to go and work and not have to be, working around football schedule, and then the vice versa, so that football players can go and work at any time and get, extra practice if they want on their own. All these little incremental details matter. And so, like, this is a big deal that I think some fans might think on, the grand scale of all the building that goes in not just with athletics, but the university and, like, all the renovations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to pass value judgment on everything and, like, do that game, but this one is absolutely necessary for the athletic department that wants 31 sports. Right. For them to have more than one indoor practice facility for all of those sports to work throughout the season. That's one that is kind of a no-brainer when you think about it.
Yeah, almost amazing it took this long to get to this point. But Penn State is at that point almost with Pat Kraft and his athletic department building the practice bubble for the other sports. So we'll keep you updated on the progress of that. But obviously, Beaver Stadium, if you missed it, you can go check out Tuesday's show here on the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. But making some more progress there, still selling those west side clubs that are going to be club seats that are going to be in play for the 2027 season once the renovation is wrapped up. Obviously, they're making strides toward getting as much done as they can at the stadium before they got to start worrying about temporary seating and things like that for 2025. So we'll keep you updated on all of that as well. Have you been over there lately, T. Frank, to check out the progress?
No, just been too busy. Every time we go over there, I've just been so busy that I haven't had a chance to really stop and take stock of everything. When they were first starting the demolition, I was there and I'd spend like 10, 15 minutes watching everything, and that I hadn't had the time.
Well, we will definitely get over there at some point here in the next couple of weeks, get you guys an update. But it's construction. I mean, at the end of the day, we can show you, but it's construction. Things are happening. You know, things go boom. Things get done. So at any rate, this is the BWI live show for May 21st. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. Let's get into the mailbag, T. Frank, as we roll through this edition of the show. First question up comes from con.x13. Okay. Question is, Penn State threw the ball on 42.63% of offensive plays last year, ranking 106 out of 134 teams in college football. That was also the third lowest number in the Big Ten, only behind Iowa and Michigan. I believe that was head Iowa and Michigan. But do we expect the percentage to increase this year, decrease, or stay roughly the same in 2025 with Andy Kotelnicki now in year 2 and
Yeah.
without obviously Tyler Warren to be the main pass catching option?
So the first thing I want to say is that I don't want that is not the correct number. But I also don't blame Con.X13 for getting the wrong number, because this is always the frustration with college football's idiotic design of adding sacks into run percentages.
Correct.
Doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense that for a passing play, you would take away rushing yardage. But history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That might be a great use of AI, is to go back and historically separate that information. I don't know how you do that because you don't have the video, but whatever. So when I checked the numbers, because that seemed absurd to me.
Right.
So I went into the advanced data. Penn State's called run play percentage was 51.7%. So it was almost exactly 50-50. Now, I tried to find some of the examples where that might be off. And I don't want to give too many of these that might be wrong, because I was just trying to do this quickly before the show. But I think they were about 9%, under 10% of their passing plays resulted in a scramble, which if you're going to, again, they're going to charge that to a run play. It was a called pass play. That gets us at least a little bit closer to Condot's number. I will agree that some of those are RPOs, right? So to me, it's the quality of the passing attempt, the drop back passing attempt. Are you putting your quarterback, who's got NFL talent, in a position to make NFL plays? And so that is the pure drop back passing portion of the offense. There's different buckets for passing: RPOs, screens, wide receiver bubbles, those kind of like designed plays where it's a shot play, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think the most dangerous thing for Penn State in their arsenal, if they can pull it off, is pairing their very strong run game with a threatening downfield passing attack. And I'm not doing it. I'm not saying anything revolutionary. This is what Andy Kotelnicki is, at least from my understanding, what he was known for, is kind of creating that threat dynamic laterally and vertically with all of his options and his deep passing. So, no, I don't expect whatever number you end with. I don't expect a big change in the called offense this upcoming year. I think it's going to be right around what it is, whether it's 42.63% or whether it's 51.7% run. Whichever number it is that you're going to believe or that you're going to go with, I don't think it changes all that much. And a lot of that is going to be off play action. So what I'm talking about, I think it's going to be a portion of the playbook, but the play action, I think, is going to take a big step forward this year.
Okay, so we'll see if that ends up being the case. Penn State, of course, looking at ways to grow in year 2 under Andy Kotelnicki and refocus its offense with Tyler Warren now off to the NFL. T. Frank, if you throw the next one up on the screen, I have lost, if we have it, I've lost my place in our little slider scale here. But next question we have comes from...
Yeah, it's not up there. Hold on one second.
Maybe I was going to say, maybe you've lost it too, because I'm looking. I'm like, yeah. I'm not sure.
No, it's not on you.
I'm looking at the right thing. But yeah, let me know when it's there, and we'll roll.
Just read it off the rundown.
Yeah, that's sorry. If you have any questions, that's okay. If you have any questions in the chat, feel free to drop them for us as well as we get through this bad podcasting portion of the show, and obviously YouTubing as
totally
well.
On me.
No worries, Steve Frank. Sleepy11 Hollow asks, Penn State has had an amazing run of elite pass rushers over the past years. Does Penn State have a young stud brewing with amazing pass rush skills?
Greg,
what says T. Frank?
I want to ask you, because this is an area where maybe sometimes I get too deep into the weeds on the high school stuff. There's a lot of those young guys in terms of guys that have youth and have 4-star. Who's the guy that stands out to you?
Well, I think look, the easy layup here is Max Granville, right? I was so impressed with him, by the way. Like, I'm actually probably too high on him at the moment and to have too high of expectations, because after getting to talk to him this spring, I was just so impressed by his demeanor, his way of describing things and going about his business to improve. So really impressed with him and the way he's progressed from year 1 to his first spring, which is now, of course, in the book. So, obviously, I think that you start with him. and you get excited about what he can do this year behind Nittany, Dennis Sutton, and the older guys on the roster. Again, I think that the older guys on the roster is just as interesting as the younger guys because you have a lot of guys back who have done some things here, some things there, but not really put it all together. So which guys do that? And then just looking at the roster in general, I mean, can Mason Robinson take a step forward as a redshirt sophomore? But to me, Jalen Harvey is the one that sticks out as somebody I'm most interested in seeing what progress he makes this year. A guy that I think you look at him and you say, yep, he fits. He looks like he fits. But what can he do on the field? That's, well, obviously, being the first guy off the bus is great, but there's been plenty of guys, especially defensive linemen in Penn State history, who have been just off the bus guys. And then when it comes to the actual on-field part of it, not quite there. So, but he's obviously a very young guy. Is he ready to take that next step? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is Granville. I think he's going to have a significant impact on the defense this year. And he's working to be a well-rounded player and all, kind of an all-around player because we know him as a speed rusher. I'm curious to see where his strength lands because not every 250 is built the same. Like technically he's about the same size as Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter had just a level of strength in his body that was more than what his listed weight would say. So that's the area I think for me that I'm most interested in seeing that translate this year because I think when he does it right, Max Granville is Chop Robinson. And I want to confirm that he is that because Chop had elements of that as well in terms of like, you can't just be all speed. He wasn't just all speed. Right. Chop wasn't given credit for how he would be destructive in the run game. And maybe he didn't get the tackle. The guy I'm looking at is Yvon Kemiju. Yep. And I know that's Fitz's guy, but like when you have that length, he might have 34-inch arms. And he's a lean 244 on the roster. He has the profile of a guy that could be kind of Dennis Sutton-esque with a little bit more flexibility in his frame. And so like I'm just always looking for guys that don't have barriers to the elite abilities. And he might be a guy that has that. The other guy that I think has an upside potential is Malachi Williams, who, again, super long, had a lean frame coming to Penn State. He's 250 now. There was just a lot of development there for me in high school to know where he is now. I didn't even see that much in the blue-white game, to be honest with you. So I don't think any of those guys are imminent this year. But there's, Kemiju and Granville, I think provides you a lot of talent next year. And the same thing with Chaz Coleman. Like those three, when you have like that as a baseline of freshmen and young players in general, I know that at that point, Granville's going to be a junior, but like that's a really good stable of pass rushers. Yeah. So I guess those are the three that you want to highlight as these guys have the opportunity to be that eventually.
Right. So Penn State will keep getting depth there for Deion Barnes. And obviously, as we mentioned, not really a part of this conversation at the moment, but you get another young guy in as well with Daniel Jennings reclassifying. So we'll see what he can do. Brad has two in the chat for us. I'm going to just gloss over this. Who will win the QB2 job? Like, I don't want to sit here and BS you, not on May 21st, not on September 21st, not at any time in between or after. It's a great battle. I mean, I think between Grunk and Smolik, they came out of spring ball. Neck and neck seems fair to me. Someone's going to have to be QB2. Obviously, one of them will outperform the other with all the things they track. But to sit here and tell you right now, I have a good feel for which one is going to do. I don't know. I mean, you're going to have to wait and see once they get more of those competitive scrimmage reps in preseason camp that maybe they don't get as much of in the spring, especially with being in Beaver Stadium once for the blue-white game. Yeah. Like, I think that's a big component of this conversation too. We're just gonna have to wait and see. I know everyone wants that answer now. I get it. But it's one that
Penn State doesn't want that answer right now. Right. Yeah, Penn State doesn't want that answer anytime soon. If they could have 2 and 2A next year and keep them as close as possible, I think they would. Now, Greg isn't going to BS you. I will give you some light BS. And this is more on the lines of, I'm not going to tell you something that I don't know is true. I'm going to give you the things that I think. And so you can have two options. And James Franklin even said it, like, this isn't just coach speak, because he really talked up Jackson Smolik this spring. He would mention that they liked, he would mention Grunkmeyer, right? And he would say, like, he's doing a good job, blah, blah, blah. But he would spend most of his time talking about Jackson Smolik. If you were concerned about one of those two players transferring, it'd probably be the guy that wasn't QB2 last year, and as anytime I saw him, was the third QB through the line. But they definitely, when you watched them, Smolik had the better day in the blue-white game. Now, it wasn't a runaway. He wasn't so far better than everybody else, but he definitely produced the most and looked the most consistent in all the different situations. That doesn't mean I don't think Grunkmeyer was bad at all. He just took a couple more called sacks than Smolik did. And so they really, if there was a gulf between them, James Franklin said, and I believe this, with the evidence we've seen, Smolik closed that gap. So more than who wins the QB2 spot, I think Penn State fans should just be confident that they've got three. And that's, to me, the most important thing about the fall is you got three guys that can win you football games. And so I wouldn't overthink it. I wouldn't worry too much about who's going to be QB2, because what you're really asking is who's going to transfer, that's going to be for spring 2026 at this point. Like, they're going to make that decision based on competition and what happens throughout this upcoming year. Because you could have a guy labeled QB2, he gets hurt, and then the QB3 comes in and actually plays and does really well. And then it doesn't matter who is labeled QB2 in fall or summer.
Right. So we'll see how that one plays out. Going to be a fun one to track. But T. Frank, as we get into the back half of the show, let's get into one of the title topics of today's show, which is your defensive power rankings. So if you listen to last week's show here on the BWI YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts, you heard us rank the position groups on offense coming out of spring practice. Now we're going to do the defense, and you can read T. Frank's rationale behind these decisions over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where it's just $1 for 1 week of access and then billed annually from there. So check us out. A lot of recruiting stuff going on, obviously, as we mentioned at the top of the show. You don't want to miss any of that, and certainly don't want to miss any of the team and transfer portal intel that might be coming as well. So join us over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Again, it's $1 for the first week, and then it's billed annually from there. T. Frank, number 5 on your list, and I got to find the funny little thing. Let's do number 5.
Number 5.
So you kick off your rankings of the defensive position groups with the defensive tackles. Why?
Well, it's going to have a lot to do with number 4. I'm actually more encouraged about the defensive tackles coming out of the spring than I was going in, because Xavier Gilliam is the real deal. Like, watching him perform, and, we only get small glimpses, and it could have been a really good day for Xavier Gilliam. But when the coaching staff is talking about him as clearly separating himself from the pack, being a part of the top unit, and then you see what that looks like in person, and it confirms all that, it's like, there's too much evidence that he's the real deal. So I think he could be very good at Penn State. I'm a huge fan of what they do of finding those DNs in high school that are athletic and promise. They show promise on the outside, but are obviously going to be D tackles, instead of just finding the biggest guy and offering that dude that plays D tackle in high school, because these guys can be the complete player. Xavier Gilliam is the next guy that could be the complete player with the proper length, height, weight, strength, all those things. The question and the problem is what you and I have talked about this whole time of, you still don't know what the 2 deep is going to look like. With Alonzo Ford being out, Caleb Artis being out, Vicky McPoy transferring, whether that has impact on 2025 or not, it probably didn't, but still, like, you are thinning the herd there. And then who are those young players? Can you rely on Ty Blanding? And who are the players that are going to step into the void? I still, as much as I just talked up Xavier Gilliam, he's a redshirt freshman. And I know Zane Durant did it. You just don't want to always be banking on a redshirt freshman inserting himself into the lineup at defensive tackle and being a major contributor. That's not preferential. So, like, guys can prove you wrong. But
yeah. I mean, especially not when you're relying on redshirt senior plus and Alonzo Ford, who has an injury history. I mean, this is a guy that, when he's on the field, pretty productive player. But can you count on a full season? Penn State certainly is, and hope so. But the depth here, and the question marks here, I think are just concerning. And to your point you were making before I rudely cut you off, guys can prove us wrong, and some will. Penn State's going to need some too. There's no doubt about that. Some of these guys down the depth chart are going to have to be contributors, and not just guys who play in mop-up duty, but guys who can play some snaps. Maybe not the most meaningful drive against Oregon or the most meaningful drive against Ohio State, but they got
to be able to hold the line, right?
Right.
They can't come in. They can't come in and be an obvious weakness that then the opponent attacks, and you get 2 or 3 reps out of them before you have to pull them off the field.
Right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, so some work to do at that position group for Penn State, but what they have is what they have. We'll have to wait and see. Again, Alonzo Ford's missed all spring practice.
Yeah.
He's an impactful guy for Penn State, but it concerns me that so much of the Penn State defensive tackle picture is, well, once you get Ford back, that'll be, things will be okay. It's like, okay, well, he's missed a lot of time over his career.
Yeah.
And you need those guys behind him. Gilliam had a great spring. I mean, if there's anyone, I'm trying to think, I was actually trying to think about this the other day and I gave up on it, but I'm not really sure there's a guy along the lines, especially who has taken an opportunity in spring and ran with it quite like he has.
Yeah. Not of his age, right? That's kind of the point of, you could say on the other side, Javen Williams stepped into the injury situation at right tackle, but he's a redshirt sophomore. Like, he's a third-year guy on campus. So that's not even close to the same thing. He had his year of physical development that he did behind the scenes, and then this is his second year of kind of working on the position. So yeah, I don't know of a guy even in recent history we can talk about that's really at that position specifically, where Penn State's historically had issues with guys maturing quickly, either physically or mentally, emotionally, to be ready to play. And so that is a grown man's position. Other than Zane Durant, there hasn't been a guy that's been able to do it like Xavier Gilliam has. By the way, not all these are up at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The number 2 and number 1 are coming today and tomorrow. Subscribe, as Greg mentioned. I also wanted to say, to our podcast audience, we had the mailbag earlier. We'd like to get you involved as well. So if you leave a 5-star comment on Apple Podcasts, or if you leave a review on Spotify, we'll go and we'll get those comments. Only if you leave us a 5-star, though. And we'll put them on future mailbags. So if you got a question, make sure you drop it in as a podcast as well, because we want to make sure we grow that side of the audience as well. Because I know that I listen to a lot of podcasts, and not everyone can take YouTube with them. And we want to make sure you're doing a great job for you as well.
So please leave us that feedback. Let's get to number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4, the middle of Jim Knowles' defense. The linebackers, of course, coached by a linebacker you great Dan Connor. Check in here right in front of the defensive tackles. Steve Frank, why?
Well, clarity. A lot of this is based off of, do we know what is the plan? And linebacker, we don't know what the plan is necessarily. We know who the plan is now when they add Amari Campbell. So we're not saying, okay, is it Tamir Robinson? Is it Anthony Specka? Is it Keon Wiley? Those guys can still factor in, but Amari Campbell is obviously going to be part of the plan. He's the only guy with middle linebacker starting experience on the roster. And so that is something that is absolutely going to factor in, and that they wanted. Leadership, all those things were part of Amari Campbell. So I'm not saying he's going to start. I'm not saying he's going to make them demonstrably better. He is going to make them more stable, I would imagine, and provide that clarity that we're looking for in kind of the what's the plan of, at least from the personnel standpoint. So I know there's probably some people that are still upset that Mohamed Toure wasn't the pick in the transfer portal. But, I think that Amari Campbell, at least when we're talking about, you mentioned soaking up reps against certain positions and certain teams. I think, but Amari Campbell with training camp in the first 3 games of the season can be on the field against Oregon. Like, that should be a reasonable goal for him, whether or not he's a starter, whether or not he's a guy that makes impact plays. I don't think he's going to hurt you in those games, because he played Power 4 football last year and didn't hurt North Carolina more than he helped them.
Right. Interesting addition there because that North Carolina defense was brutal. And I was looking down because apparently Mac Brown is scorching earth this morning over his dismissal and what UNC is giving Bill Belichick.
I wondered what
there.
that graphic was. I scrolled by and I saw Bill Belichick, Mac Brown. And I'm like, nope, no time. Don't care.
Yep,
We got to go.
I caught my eye. I looked down. I'm like, that's interesting. So I know when you said Amari, I'm like, oh, yeah, right. So anyway, we'll get into that after the show. But yeah, interesting addition here. That was a bad North Carolina defense. But what can this guy do in a defense where he not only has arguably the best defensive coordinator in the country leading it, but also more talent around him? Just simply put, more talent around him. So
yeah.
Interesting addition there for Penn State to a linebacker room that, again, you have Tony Rojas coming back from offseason cleanup, and what does he look like this summer now that he will be fully healthy? He's one of the guys that fascinates me most on this team, T. Frank, because I just don't know what to expect this year. I think we overlooked the fact that he played hurt all last year. And what does a presumably, as far as we know, going to be fully healthy Tony Rojas look like with a year older? And that's, I think, fascinating because we don't know the answer. I think I know what the answer is going to be, but
couldn't get my eyebrows any higher to agree with you, silently agree with you on camera. Yeah, there's no way you can talk about Tony Rojas's performance last year without talking about the fact that he was injured. Right. And I just the internet peer pressure is not going to move me off of this point that you're not appreciating what Tony Rojas did last year of playing injured and everything that goes into that. Right. Just like some read between the lines with what I'm saying, the everything he had to do to play and the fact that he was out there and productive. Yes, he was not a perfect player and he struggled with tackles. And you don't think he was fitting runs correctly because he couldn't use one of his shoulders to take any sort of contact. So he had to adapt his game and find a way to still produce. It led to bad defense. That's the end goal. I get it. But if you're not appreciating that and you're one of those people that values the toughness and the grittiness aspect of football, you're missing a huge part of last year's storyline. If Tony Rojas decides that he can't play and is too injured and has to have that surgery that he had off season, in season, they are now down to no starting linebackers. Dom DeLuca and Kobe King. That's what they have last year. That's it. So he toughed it out for the team and helped get them to the doorstep of the college football playoff. I don't think there is enough talked about the fact that he did that and we're not putting his performance in that context. So I know that I just went off on one of T. Frank's tangents off something you said concisely, but it still bothers me, man. Like some of and part of it is that James Franklin's injury policy puts these players in positions where their play suffers and there's no explanation. So I don't blame fans for being like, this dude stinks when you don't know what's going on. And the other team can see it on film. That's the thing. If I can see it, they can see it. And Ohio State specifically attacked Tony Rojas in certain ways that other teams tried to replicate because they saw he was injured and because they knew they could pick on him literally on certain sides of his body. He was not going to fill gaps correctly. So that's the end. I'll stop talking.
Well, before I get you even more wound up, let's move on to number 3.
Yeah.
Number 3.
The defensive ends check in for T. Frank at number 3 in his ranking of the Penn State defensive position groups coming out of spring practice. Go for it. Why?
I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of questions about this group. You've got Zariah Fisher, a guy who is a veteran and looked good in the spring and, kind of stabilized the opinion of this group. But has he ever started for Penn State? I don't think he's ever started for Penn State. A former linebacker who's made the full transition. That's a huge question. He's your starting defensive end opposite of Daniel Dennis Sutton. And Daniel Dennis Sutton has to prove that he is the bedrock pass rusher. We can talk about the young guys in a second. But you're not getting anywhere if he doesn't have an ascendant performance as an all-around defensive end. And he's been good, and the sack numbers have been good. You look at the advanced metrics, and you look at some of the data of his win percentages, and you watch some of his rushes outside of the sacks, and that's where I have some concerns. I've had the same concerns since he was a freshman, and I don't want to beat on this. I don't want to make it sound like he's not a good football player, but he's got to be the guy this year, and he's yet to be the guy in the pass rush during his time. So it's time. Like that has to happen this year. I have the same thoughts about him that I do about Drew Aller, where like I see the talent, I see the work ethic, I see the maturity, but it's got to happen. And so like that's it. And so like we are basing this off of those two veterans and an incredible amount of depth of talent behind them. But there are still questions about the DN group. Like I struggled putting him 3, but I couldn't put him 4 with linebacker in the situation. If I don't even know how the linebacker is going to be used this year in terms of like what they're asked to do specifically in this new defense.
Yeah, I'm with you in terms of there's a lot of guys across this roster who find themselves coming back this year to take that next quote-unquote step in their development and be a game wrecker. We did this a game wrecker show, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, whenever it was.
Yeah.
But that's just it. Like it's and not to say those guys haven't showcased that. Obviously, Drew Aller and Nittany not necessarily in the same conversation there, but yeah, it is his turn to shine and be the dominant pass rusher that Penn State has had for years, and that he has obviously studied under and worked under and improved under. And there's some guys down the depth chart who need to take another step as well. So now I don't have any qualms with you putting them there.
Well, that's what I got for them. Again, we talked about Max Granville earlier. I'm part of this is the assertion he is going to be in the same way that Nick Tarburton was the starter, but Chop Robinson in 2022 was kind of the guy at that position. I think there's an opportunity for that to be Max Granville this year. I even went back and like looked at their birth dates and matched them up from like how old were they, like back to my whole physical maturity conversation. I want to make sure like he's old enough and he's physical enough and strong enough that he can be in a comparable timeline to Chop Robinson, and he is. Like that's all correct. So I'm expecting that from him, and that's going to be something they have to get from, I think, specifically him and obviously Jalen Harvey and the other guys we mentioned.
All right, let's get to number 2.
Number 2.
So, assuming you're following along closely, you know we only have 2 positions left, and both are in the secondary. So, number 2, T. Frank, it's the safeties.
This is, again, one of the things I'm very confident in. The safeties are going to be the star of the show. So, this is partially the talent there, and Zakee Wheatley being a senior, and that lining up with who are you going to build the defense around, a guy who's a talented player, has instincts to get to the football, and putting him in a position to get to the football as a run defender and as a coverage player. So the safeties are going to rack up, in my opinion, they're going to rack up a lot of stats, and they're the focal point of the defense, and they're talented. Like you bring in King Mack, and I know that the corners are a part of the conversation at that nickel position. It's a safety position. So I'm counting anybody who plays there as a safety, including Zion Tracy. He's got to do safety things, and he's got to do safety things well. Right. So there are really just 2 corner positions until they go dime, and then they do like a real man coverage situation. That's how I'm viewing the situation specifically. And terms and conditions apply. I'll amend that later if I feel like it. But so those 3 safeties are going to be the core of the defense, and they've got good talent with King Mack and Dejon Lane and all those players.
Very hard to believe that. I shouldn't say very hard to believe, but very underrated part is a better way to put it of Anthony Poindexter's work as a recruiter and as a developer of talent, that Penn State could lose 2 draftable safeties, and obviously one who played the entire 2024 season and was a huge part of the defense, and yet you can still feel very good about where this group is entering 2025. I think that's a tremendous credit to Anthony Poindexter and the work he and the defensive coaches do at the last level of the defense. Let's get to number 1.
Number 1.
Led by A.J. Harris, it's the cornerbacks.
Yeah, and again, part of this is that terms and conditions apply. There's only really 2 corners that we're worrying about, the outside corners, because we're counting that nickel player as a safety. They've got 3 guys that with starting experience, and just based off a historical perspective, when Penn State had 3 corners in Joey Porter Jr., Johnny Dixon, and Kalen King that were starting caliber, and 2 of those guys were competing for reps and competing for starting positions. And I think, there's some theater involved in what they do there, but that's a real competition too.
Right.
That produced some really good results in that Manny Diaz defense. It's going to look different. It's going to be different in 2025, but I think that the situation is still the same. Terry Smith, I was a little, I don't know if I was surprised in terms of that he had a high opinion of AJ Harris, but saying that he's an All-American candidate this year, I mean, that is a level of confidence. That's a level of projection for him that'd make him a first-round pick, a first-round talent as a junior. And, I think he's physically capable of those things. And so it's about like the leadership, the mentality, all that stuff. And I don't know how you put him anywhere other than one when you've got that combination. Davian Collins, I think, is really underrated amongst fans. I don't think people realize how sticky in coverage he is. That's half the battle. I know the catch point is one thing. Watching him perform in the spring, he is more aggressive at every part of the route, including the catch point, than he was last year. And then Elliott Washington, I still have some concerns about Elliott Washington from a production play standpoint, but maybe it's just rough edges. He's got the athleticism. He's got the, off-season grind, everything, coach's son. The game makes sense to him now. Those three guys, I'm betting on those kind of rough edges I've seen from Elliott Washington, those being hammered out because of this competition and the talent that he has.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think your list is about as fair as it gets coming out of spring practice. Also think maybe it looks a little bit different once we get some game footage later this year, but we'll have to wait and see. Final thoughts, T. Frank, coming down the home stretch?
There's too much. So just bluewhiteillustrated.com, subscribe, be with us, hang out. We'll have a conversation about all the things. Elite 11, recapping some of those things. I think that was a really interesting thing. And of course, tomorrow we're going to be talking about more of that and, getting deeper into some of these thoughts with recruiting on the recruiting show starting at 10 a.m. on Thursday morning.
Busy Thursday ahead for Penn State. You won't want to miss that recruiting show here on the BWI YouTube channel with T. Frank, Sean Fitz, and Ryan Snyder. Get all the latest Penn State news at bluewhiteillustrated.com. It's $1 for a week, then billed annually from there. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. It's another edition of BWI Live in the books. We will talk to you next time.